Hello, everyone. This interview will become part of the 2021 BKS Virtual Expo. My name is Doug Norman, and I am talking to the Kaleidoscope artist, Bob Aid. Bob, how and when did you start making kaleidoscopes?
Well, I think we always had an interest in glass. My wife's grandfather helped that with his copper wheel glass engraving, which I attempted to get a feel for. He would engrave monograms for people on glass pitchers and tableware and so forth, and that gave us an interest in glass. And then also at art shows, glass always caught our eye. And so in 1982, we took a stained glass class and began making small lampshades, sun catchers to hang in windows, tissue box cases, windows, things of that sort. And we entered them into a local artists co-op. They were accepted. And so that began our commercial part of our glass business. And then on a vacation traveling through North Carolina, we passed a glass shop gallery. And so we stopped and went in to see what they had. And a stained glass kaleidoscope popped out at us. And we thought, well, gee, that would be fun to make. But how does a kaleidoscope work? We had no idea at that point. So when we got home, a friend gave me a toy cardboard kaleidoscope he had in his closet, and we tore that apart and kind of got the concept of the reflective surfaces and tumbling of plastic objects in a rotating end on the kaleidoscope. And from that, we sort of copied it into a stained glass case and attached a box on the end with some glass pieces in it that tumbled. And for Christmas of, this was in 1983 now, and Christmas of that year then, we made 8 of these, one for each of our 6 kids and one for each of our sets of parents. We put a note in with the kaleidoscope saying that since these were rather rare, there were so few of them, they would undoubtedly become very valuable someday, with tongue in cheek. Ultimately, we didn't have one for ourselves, to make one for ourselves at that point, but ultimately when parents passed away, we got them back. So I do have one that I can show you of the original, and it's just a simple 3-sided glass case with a tumbling wheel, and makes a nice sound when the parts tumble, but it's a little crude. And from that, we continued to refine it and build more kaleidoscopes. And as we put those into the artist co-op, we found that we had less and less time to make the other things, the pictures, the lampshades, and so forth, because we were spending more and more time making the kaleidoscopes, and they were outselling the other items. We didn't stumble across BKS or Cozy Baker for several years until in probably 1987, when Cozy's book Through the Kaleidoscope was published. One of my sons gave a copy of that to us. And of course, that opened up a whole new world on kaleidoscopes. And I believe in the book, Cozy invited people to contact her, which I did. And then she invited me to send in a sample. So I sent one in, not too much unlike the originals that we were making. And she commented back that I should consider first surface mirror instead of bathroom mirror, which we'd been using. And also she made some suggestions about attaching the object box with something more attractive than nuts and bolts. So it was a step forward for us to have that experience. The kaleidoscope activity continued on then as we improved our scopes and got familiar with the Brewster Society and began attending conventions. And this was very rewarding to us. We enjoyed it a lot, not only the physical aspect of making the scopes, but the social aspect of interacting with collectors and other artists. So at that point, we began to look for new items to design and build. And in the Northwest, in Seattle here, we had a group of Brewster people who we gathered with on occasion. And one of them introduced me to, or at the meeting, introduced us to polarization. And that was a new concept to me, but it had a lot of appeal. And so I began to learn more about polarization, and subsequently designed several scopes with a small chamber in it, which contains a variety of materials that bend light. And this became an object cell chamber for a number of our scopes. Polarization is really a fairly simple concept, and it's one that David Brewster did a lot of work on and wrote about extensively. A polarizing filter is simply a filter that has extremely fine lines engraved into it. And they're so fine and so close together that scattered light, which is around us all the time, gets filtered out and only can come through in a direction of the lines on this film. And so if you put two of these together and rotate them 90 degrees to each other, it filters out all of the light and essentially turns black until you put a material in between. Can you see that? That produces color as the light is bent coming through these filters. The
Light's a little too bright, Bob. Can't see too much with it. Maybe a flashlight or something, but I don't know.
Okay. In any event, one of my quirks, I guess, was to carry around with me polarizing filters and a piece of material that will bend the light between the filters. And as you mentioned to me, Doug, at one occasion, I had a pocket full of this material with me. And I still do. I have small pieces of the filters and material in my wallet, so that if I encounter a piece of material that I think might work in a polarized cell, I can pull these out and test it on the site. And so that's been a lot of fun. And the objects that create that light, the reason it's created is because in the forming process, whether it's a plastic cup or a plate, or in this case, a Scotch tape dispenser, or a piece of bread bag that you stretch, there is stress in that plastic, and that's causing the light to be bent as it goes through it, so that bent light then is allowed to come through the filters in the form that we see as color. And the thickness and the angle that it is within that cell gives it the varying colors that we see. But it's been a lot of fun playing with polarization over the years, and something I've enjoyed a lot. At another convention, in a discussion with Marty Shearer, I thought he inquired about or mentioned something about a double polyangular scope. I was already making a couple of different models of polyangular scopes where the mirrors can be adjusted to various angles, giving you a variety of segments in the image. And a double polyangular mirror system kind of intrigued me. And so until the next convention, I worked on that concept. And I thought I'd surprise him by showing him what I had developed. But he didn't even remember the conversation. So, but still, it took me another step forward in my kaleidoscopic design. And so the double polyangular set of mirrors that I designed are movable. All four mirrors are movable. And so you get two mandalas, which are overlapping. And the object chambers, there are two object chambers as well. And one contains glass pieces, and the other one contains polarizing filters and material. So it's an interesting combination, and you can independently rotate these so that you can get various speeds and directions as you play with it.
Now, which scope was that?
I call it diamonds. It's a fairly large scope. It's one of my higher end priced pieces. But from the 90s on, I began to specialize in 3D images, three-dimensional images. And this was because of a coincidence I had on a business trip to Asia in about 1993, where I had some spare time. I was in Hong Kong, had some spare time, and I sought out the largest department store in Hong Kong just to see what type of items they would sell in Hong Kong in a department store. And they had a kaleidoscope department. And so as I'm looking at the various kaleidoscopes they had, I came across one of Stephen Gray's parasol kaleidoscopes, which is quite famous and beautiful. With these parasols, which change, which are three-dimensional, and a beautiful piece of work. And I was blown away when I saw that. And later at a restaurant, I sat there on a paper placemat and tried to sketch out what I had seen so I could remember as best as possible until I got home from that trip. And when I did get home, I grabbed handfuls of mirrors and play with them, trying to figure out how to replicate that three-dimensional image, which took me a while to master, but subsequently led to a series of what I called my crystal scopes. And I started out with what I called the crystal pyramid, which was a pyramidal shape, and then went on to do the one that I kind of favor the most, which I call crystal star. And it's actually sort of a planetary type thing that you would see in the sky, where it's got a North Pole and a South Pole and an equator. And then there are radial curves of pieces of glass, of mirror glass images that approach the North Pole and also approach the South Pole. And as you turn the object cell behind the mirrors, then you're changing the colors and patterns within this crystal star. And so I had a lot of fun designing and building that, and subsequently some of the others as well. I have two glass kilns, and with those I can do fusing, glass fusing, and also glass slumping. And so many of my cases are round, and that's done by placing the glass into the kiln on metal pipes that are coated with a ceramic material so that the glass won't bond to the pipe. And so I have quite a number of cylindrical scopes that I've developed over the years. Another thing that happened in the late, well, actually it was around 2000 or so, 2001 or two, at one of the conventions, Kaleidoscope Mukashikan was represented, and they approached a number of the artists about a Kaleidoscope of the Month program that they were going to initiate. And so I was selected as one of the artists to contribute to that or be involved in that program. And so I used this particular scope here, which has a conical chamber on the end, or a spheric rounded chamber on the end, in which I have some lamp-worked glass pieces and some glass beads, and then just a simple triangular glass shape. But on submission of this item, they told me, as well as the other artists, that every single one that we submitted had to be exactly the same, because they did a large advertising program, and they had photos of our scopes, which went out to their entire mailing list, and they put them in newspaper advertisements, magazine advertisements, and it resulted in orders, substantial orders over the years. I provided 200 of these every other month for about 3 years. And so that amounted to something like 3,000 of these, everyone having to be exactly the same. So all the lampwork pieces in here, I had to do exactly the same, so that the scope would match the photos that they had used for their advertising program. And so that was an interesting program. And actually that one led to this scope, which was a follow-on program that they had. And again, repetitive design for the scope. I've had several large projects in more recent years, and that began with a project for our church, where they had 47 openings in a church wall, which they would like to have art glass installed in. And so I cut the glass, and each piece of glass I had to measure the openings precisely, because everyone was slightly different, either a little wider, taller, narrower, whatever, and or slightly at an askew. So I had to do 47 custom pieces of art glass to be installed into the church windows. But it makes a beautiful result. And it's toward the front of the church on the side. And so it's viewable from the congregation during the service, as well as walking by or traveling by outside the church. Then I got involved in another large project 2 years ago, where my daughter was working or it works for a large publisher in the Northwest, that one of their publications is the Everett Herald. And Everett, Washington is a sizable suburb of Seattle. And so the Everett Herald goes out to a pretty good circulation in the area. One of the writers was in a discussion with my daughter, telling her how she was looking for some new ideas to write about. And my daughter said, well, why don't you go to the Shack Art Center here in Everett? They're having an auction, a charity auction this weekend, and you might find that of interest. And by the way, my dad is going to have some kaleidoscopes in that auction. Oh, kaleidoscopes, that's interesting. Tell me about that. Well, that led to an interview where they came out to the house, visited my studio, and I toured them around and showed them the things that I do. And they wrote up a really nice front page article on me, which resulted in a phone call from the manager of a large architectural firm in Seattle that was working on a project for the Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Medical Center. They were planning a 6-floor addition expansion to the hospital, and it was going to have a kaleidoscopic theme. So seeing my picture in my article in the newspaper, he responded right away and called me to see if he could get together with me and discuss their project, architectural project. And so we got together, and that led to some more meetings at their offices in Seattle, and some more other people from Cincinnati and Seattle coming out to see me. And we began to experiment with some concepts for the hospital. And subsequently, that led to my designing and helping to construct kaleidoscope installations for this hospital. And it consists mainly of a 6-foot diameter object wheel, which is made of stained glass. And it's in segments, much like a pizza would appear, except each segment has multiple segments within it. And they're of different pieces of art glass. And this 6-foot wheel, art glass wheel, is mounted on a 6-foot acrylic wheel and subsequently a frame, which is driven by a motor that rotates this wheel once every 2 minutes. And this is installed into a wall on each of 4 floors in this expansion. And there's a cutout area in the wall about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, where you can see the wheel as it moves by. And then alongside of that are mounted 5 kaleidoscopes, 6-inch by 18-inch kaleidoscopes. And each of these has a different mirror system. So you can look through each of these different scopes and see different patterns and images appear. And then each of the 4 floors where these installations occur have different scopes too. So you have to go through the whole hospital to get the whole effect. And they're considering the possibility of adding a 5th installation on the main floor by the entrance. But this started 2 years ago. I delivered the material for the wheels in November, and we assembled them to the acrylic large wheel. And then they didn't ship that until February with the other 3 wheels as well. They bolted these frames down inside of a truck, transported them from Portland, where they're located, to Cincinnati. And one of them has just recently been installed into the wall on on the 4th floor, I believe it is. And it still is being framed in and trimmed and whatnot. So it's not completed. And the kaleidoscopes themselves are still sitting in Portland, waiting to be delivered. So it looks now as if it'll be toward the end of the year before the installations are complete and the hospital is open, ready for its grand opening. But that's been a real exciting project. And then about the time that I was delivering those materials to Portland, to the architect firm, I was contacted by a group that is working in Louisville, Kentucky, on the restoration of some land along the Ohio River, a 23-acre site that's been a landfill. And they've cleared out that landfill and they're restoring it into a botanical garden. And they also wanted to have a kaleidoscopic theme. And so they contacted me and we discussed possibilities of what they would like to have happen. And so I designed, well, I gave them a number of concepts about what they could have and where they might best be located around the garden. And I just shipped the first one for installation about 2 months ago. And they've put it together, and it's a 4-inch by 22-inch kaleidoscope tube, but it's really a teleidoscope. It has a 4-inch crystal sphere in the end, and it picks up the images of the garden, reflects them in the mirrors, and so the viewer can see the garden kaleidoscopically. And the tube, the 4-inch tube, is mounted so that it can be tilted as well as rotated or swiveled, so they can aim it at wherever they please to pick up either territorial views or as close as something right below the kaleidoscope. And it's been a lot of fun making that and trying to work with them on colors and concepts. The construction is out of aluminum, which I've had powder coated, It's totally durable and weatherproof. And I have one here that I've also built for my purposes, and we're waiting to get more feedback from Louisville on how they want to proceed from here as well. But the kaleidoscopic activity over the last 38 years that I've been involved with it has been very rewarding and an important part of my life, and I'm very grateful to BKS. My reward for doing something for people that makes them feel happy is what I really enjoy.
Well, that's a nice bunch of information for us. I do have one question.
Sure.
How did you find, from an artistic viewpoint, producing all those scopes for the Japanese market? How did you find that a little limiting or stifling or what?
Well, it worked out that I would build them in batches of 20. And so I'd have boxes with everything for the first step, do that. And then I'd move it to another station and do the second step. So it was sort of a production line rather than one all the way through and then the next all the way through. It was in batches of 20. And since I had 2 months between each shipment, it was time to reasonably work with and accomplish, each batch of 20, although I needed 10 of those batches for each shipment. So it worked out quite well. And there's a YouTube video that shows every step in that procedure. Where do I have it? Which I'd be glad to share with anyone who wants to watch it. Hold on just a second, Doug. Where's my notebook?
Well, if you send it to me sometime, Bob, I can put it on the website along with this, actually.
Okay, but another one of my designs has led to a substantial quantity also. This is a fairly simple scope, and actually it's not that original in design. It's just a 3-sided art glass case with a wand on the end, a small wand, and this is only 5 inches long, 6-inch wand in an assortment of colors, and both of the cases and of the tubes. There's quite a wide variety of case materials that I use. This is actually some of the same glass that went into the hospital wheels. But I've made probably close to 1,500 of these. And I make these also in batches of about 2 dozen, in lots of eight at a time, but in batches of about two dozen. And so I try to use my spare time whenever I can find it to get ahead on those, because when I get an order, it's usually for a couple dozen of them. And so I like to have them ready so I can ship them on out to the gallery right away.
You're not getting bored at this point in your life, I take it.
No,
No.
no. Gail asks me that, do you get bored doing this? Because I'm sitting there watching TV and foiling glass, or that type of thing. And so it's not always concentrated at a table in the studio. I'm in the rest of the house watching TV while I'm doing some of this work. And nice thing about it is I'm getting paid for it. So.
All righty. Well, Bob.
Here's another little thing too. Along with the botanical garden scope, which of course is 4 inches by 22 inches, I also developed these handheld models, which are again a kaleidoscope in various colors, and they're about 8.5 inches long. But I'm thinking that the gift shops, what the garden's going to do is place the scope in places where there is some fresh bloom, foliage, new foliage, or fresh blossoms coming out, And so they can move it from place to place around the garden. It's portable. It's on a heavy stand, so I mean, it's not going to walk away, but it is movable from place to place. And they're going to have a little sign describing what the foliage is you're looking at. And then the tagline on the sign is going to say, now look at it through the kaleidoscope. And so we're thinking that afterwards they might want to take one of these home with them so they can look around their own yard and gardens and enjoy and remember what they saw at the Louisville Waterfront Botanical Garden.
That's nice marketing. Anything else for us, Bob?
Well, I could go on and on, but that pretty well covers it, Doug.
All righty. Bob, thank you very much for taking time to talk to us today.
You're welcome.